Recording in progress.
Let's begin by waving and greeting to our friends joining us via Zoom and Zoomies waving to us Roomies. Good morning. Welcome to the to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Lynchburg. 50 years of practice just doesn't go away overnight. Here we gather in a spirit of freedom and friendship. Whoever you are, whatever your beliefs, whatever your age, and whomever you love, you are welcome here. As we work together for justice, compassion, and peace, we also acknowledge with humility that our buildings sit on Monacan land, as does my house. My name is Garry DeVol. I've been a member of First Unitarian, I need to change that, of this congregation for 51 years. And I'm a member of the Sunday Services Committee. If you are with us for the first time, we're glad you chose to be here this morning to participate in the service for this church community we love so much. We would be happy to tell you more about our community during virtual social time following the service. If you would like to receive our monthly newsletter and Friday email updates, you can fill out one of the yellow cards in the pocket of the chair back in front of you and drop it in the offering basket. If you're on Zoom, there's a newcomer connection form that can be found on the visitor page of our website at uulynchburg.org. You may also wish to join our Facebook group. For those of you on Zoom, please note the order of service is or will be soon in the chat to the right of your screen if you're using a PC. If you're using a phone, you can find the chat, but it's a little trickier. There's a link at the bottom of the screen. As we enter our time of worship, we light the flame of our chalice sharing these words. May the light we now kindle inspire us to use our powers to heal and not to harm, to help and not to hinder, to bless and not to curse, to serve you, O Spirit of life. Our opening words this morning were written by Eric Walker Wickstrom. We come together this morning because within us there's something that knows we need more than we can find in our aloneness. We know instinctively in the depths of ourselves that we need others for this journey of life, even though we also guard our independence and individuality quite jealously. So, let us celebrate all that makes us unique, yet also all that makes us one. and let us dream dreams of all that we can do together. Please rise in body or spirit and join me in singing hymn number 348, Guide My Feet.
All right, I'd like to invite all the young ones and young at heart to join me down front. She's coming. She's got to put her bookmark in. These are very important things. Good morning. And look, you guys both brought a friend today. That's pretty cool. All right, so I have a really good book today. It's called The Most Magnificent Thing. And it's by Ashley Spires. This is a regular girl and her best friend in the whole wide world. They do all kinds of things together.
Is it a cat or a dog?
It's, I don't know, kind of a cat dog, I think.
I'm a dog.
They do all kinds of things together. They race, they eat, they explore, they relax. She makes things, he unmakes things. One day, the girl has a wonderful idea. She is going to make the most magnificent thing. She knows just how it will look. She knows just how it will work.
Oh, I think I know.
All she has to do is make it. And she makes things all the time. This will be easy peasy. First, she hires an assistant. Next, they gather their supplies. Then they set up somewhere completely out of the way and get to work.
That is not completely up.
The girl tinkers and hammers and measures, while her assistant pounces and growls and chews. When she is finished, she steps back to admire her work. She walks around one side. Her assistant examines the other side. It doesn't look right.
I knew that was going to happen.
Her assistant picks it up and gives it a shake. It doesn't feel right either. They are shocked to discover that the thing isn't magnificent or even good. It isn't even kind of, sort of okay. It is all wrong. The girl,
happens to me like all the time.
yeah, the girl tosses it aside and gives it another go. She smooths and wrenches and fiddles. Her assistant circles and tugs and wags. When she is finished, she stands up and takes a long look at it. Her assistant gives it a nudge with his paw. The thing is still wrong. She decides to try again. The girl saws and glues and adjusts. She stands and examines and stares. She twists and tweaks and fastens. She fixes and straightens and studies. She tries all different ways to make it better. She makes it square. She makes it round. She gives it legs. She adds antenna.
They look amazing.
She makes it fuzzy. She makes it long, short, rough, smooth, big, small. One even smells of stinky cheese. But none of them are magnificent.
They are magnificent.
Her hard work attracts a few admirers, but they don't understand. They can't see the magnificent thing that is in her head. She gets mad. The angrier she gets, the faster she works. She smashes pieces into shapes. She slams parts together. She pummels the little bits in. Her hands feel too big to work, and her brain is too full of all the not right things. If only this thing would just work.
Calm down and then it will.
Crunch. Ow. She slams her finger. The pain starts in her finger. It rushes up to her brain, and she explodes. It is not her finest moment. I'm no good at this. I quit. Her assistant suggests a walk. It's not much help at first, but before long, she starts to feel different. Bit by bit, the mad gets pushed out of her head. As they stroll along, she comes across the first wrong thing she made. The bad feelings are about to start all over again. Then she notices something surprising. There are some parts of the wrong things that are really quite right. The bolts on one, the shape of another, the wheel to seat ratio of the next. There are all sorts of parts that she likes. By the time she reaches the end of the trail, she finally knows how to make the thing magnificent. She gets to work. She works carefully
I think she's going to combine them all.
and slowly, tinkering, hammering, twisting, fiddling, gluing, painting.
Hey, someone's taking it.
Her assistant makes sure there are no distractions. And all these people come and see what she's working on. And they say, this is the perfect thing to ward off bears. This will stop that leak. This one's all wet. The afternoon fades into evening. Finally, she finishes. She alerts the assistant. The pair take a good, long look. It leans a little to the left, and it's a bit heavier than expected. The color could use a bit of work too, but it's just what she wanted. They climb aboard and take it for a spin. They are not disappointed. It really is the most magnificent thing.
It's like she's riding a motorcycle and that's the side.
It is. It's a great little sidecar, isn't it? So I like this book because today upstairs we're going to be talking about the UU value of pluralism. And we talked about it a little bit back in May. Do you remember anything that we learned about pluralism? It's been a little while.
All I remember is that we learned that.
Yeah, and so one of the things we learned about is that there's more than one right way to look at things, and there's more than one right path to take.
Now I remember.
Does that sound familiar? And so I like that when she looked at her different projects in different ways, she found that although one of them may not be just right for her, if she looks at them in a different way, there's parts of them that can be the right way and put them all together, and she's found her right way.
Yeah, that's definitely the.
You think so?
It has a virgin. It's not.
So that's why we read this story today. So we're going to head upstairs and see what other ways we can learn about pluralism. All right?
Learning about pluralism.
Yep. Let's head up.
The ministries of our church are supported by the love, talents, and efforts of our many volunteers and staff, as well as the monetary support of our members and friends. If you found this church to be of value in your life, then I invite you to be generous, as our morning offering is now freely given and gratefully received. We receive these monetary gifts along with the gifts of your time, work, and creativity, which also sustain our church. As together we give generously to support our congregation, let us also commit ourselves to a unity of spirit to make manifest a more just, peaceful, and loving world. It is our tradition to honor the whole of our lives, and so we lift our hearts in gratitude for the gift of life and praise the faithfulness of those who went before and set a pattern of excellence. For parents whose love wrought better than they knew. For teachers whose faith in us was a blessing beyond measure. For friends whose uncalculating acceptance remains an evergreen memory. For those whose challenges have stirred us to new resolve and occasionally new heights. For all of these known to us and the host of unknowns whose trust we are the beneficiaries of, we raise the ancient toast, L'chaim, to life. May we find in these moments together a blessing of peace and renewal, that we may return to the daily round with the calmness and strength adequate to our need. So may it be. I've often wondered if we wouldn't be better off if that were our national anthem. At our last Sunday Services Committee meeting, Terry expressed the opinion that someone should speak on a topic related to Independence Day today. Since we, or I for that matter, have failed to find an alternative speaker, you're stuck with me today. For a little background, I'm a graduate of Wesleyan University, which is in Middletown, Connecticut. I have a degree in history, but my concentration was Asian history. Therefore, I have no particular expertise in American history, although I'm familiar with the techniques of historical research. And I've had neither the time nor the energy for extensive examination of original sources, so I've limited myself to information listed online, available through Google searches, and all the qualifications and so on would apply there. Although I did find, and this is interesting, on the National Archives website, they have the original text of the Declaration of Independence, the Articles of Confederation, and the Constitution, if you want to see what it actually says. Particularly the Articles of Confederation I found interesting because it's shorter than the Constitution for this church, which kind of makes me understand why they turned out to be unworkable. On Thursday, we celebrated the 247th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, one of the founding documents of the United States of America. Independence, whether from external political influences such as British colonialism, or from undue interpersonal or domestic political influence, has been, in my estimation, baked into the American psyche. In doing a minor amount of research for this talk, I read one source that described the issuance of the Declaration as having happened in the middle of an armed conflict that began years earlier, with such events as the Boston Tea Party and the conflicts in Lexington and Concord, Massachusetts, and didn't end until surrender of a British army under Cornwallis at Yorktown, Virginia on October 19th, 1781. From my recollection of the history I learned in elementary and high school, and you got to remember this was almost 60 years ago, so my recollection is foggy at best. Anyway, I was left with the impression that the Declaration began the conflict with Britain. But in fact, the British were planning for war in 1775 to bring the unruly American colonies to heel. I also learned, or was reminded, that considerable aid and support was given to the Army and Navy of the fledgling nation at Yorktown by France, with French troops reinforcing the American troops, and a French fleet having prevented a British fleet from landing troops to reinforce the British and blockading Yorktown from further supply and reinforcements. In fact, something I don't remember ever being aware of, the French troops outnumbered the American troops by a considerable margin. There were 10,000 plus French soldiers. There were 5,000, between 5,000 and 6,000 Americans, 3,500 or so in addition were described as militia, but in parentheses it says not engaged. So I guess they weren't involved in the fighting, may have been held as a reserve. It seems reasonable to conclude that French aid was instrumental in the American victory, and that one proved to be the last battle of the Revolution, although the peace treaty wasn't signed until September 3rd, 1783, almost 2 years later. Going back to the Declaration in 1776, again, with these secondary, tertiary, and so on sources, it was as much to establish the rebellious colonists as a separate entity in order to encourage alliances with other nations, particularly France, to obtain their assistance in the struggle against England, as it was for domestic consumption. Eventually, this aim was reached, but not until February 6, 1778, when the Treaty of Amity and Commerce was signed, and that was with France. This also followed the famous winter encampment at Valley Forge, Pennsylvania in the winter of 1778. And I had to correct myself because I had put in 1977 and 1978. I looked at that, that ain't right. My intention with this narrative was to put the celebration of July 4th in some kind of context that is frequently glossed over. However, independence has a much more varied meaning in our daily lives. Our children begin totally dependent on us as parents. A large part of our parental duty is to prepare them for independent living, to allow them to survive and thrive when we are no longer responsible for them or no longer in the picture. Navigating that transition from dependence to independence can be a very rough time, and I'm thinking of teenage years, for both teenagers typically, and parents under the best of circumstances. Each family hopes to weather the transition successfully and to be able to maintain harmonious relationships when the youngsters finally become adults. For the parents of special needs children, the challenge may be to help to equip their children with the skills and support to survive the demise of their parents. I can't imagine the stress of that. As we grow older, the situation can reverse, as some or most elderly adults have declines in health, cognition, and mobility that can make it difficult or impossible to maintain an independent lifestyle. The rising demand for assisted living and residential nursing care as the number of elderly increases is putting strains on governmental and personal budgets. In addition to institutional resources devoted to elder care, there are any number of couples in which one partner remains able enough to care for the other, easing the burden on society, but increasing the burden on those individuals. Aside from aging, there can be multiple occasions when accident or illness will incapacitate a person, leaving them in need of assistance for days, weeks, or even much longer. And I've been through several bouts of that myself, having 5 bicycle accidents that involved lengthy recoveries, 3 of which involved broken bones. Don't like to think about that too much. Sometimes a parent, spouse, or child can provide the needed care, but other times outside assistance is required. Extended family, friends, or neighbors can fulfill the need, but often the need is too great or specialized for non-professional level care. As UUs, we recognize interdependence, including it among the defining principles of our faith, as the independent web of life. Interdependence better describes the lives of most people in many, if not most, of the phases of their lives. The variations I previously described for independence are better described as independence or interdependence. For all practical purposes, I think independence is a myth. As indicated earlier, the founding of the nation depended on alliance with France. I think it is true to say that the entire history of the nation has included formal alliances or informal cooperation with other nations. Recently, in historical terms at least, the NATO alliance and the United Nations have combined not so much to prevent armed conflict, unfortunately, although they have prevented some armed conflicts, but to limit the scope of armed conflicts that have arisen. And basically, we haven't had a third world war yet. On a social and political level, independence is also a myth, with each of us depending on the public and private utilities for power, water, and sewage to some extent, limited for me as a rural dweller with a well and septic system to power, for example. Roads and bridges, law enforcement, and for that matter, laws. Currency is a medium of exchange, and all the other features and trappings of modern society. The most independent of billionaires still depend on a small army of attendants to get through their days. Personal assistants, chauffeurs, landscapers, lawyers, accountants, etc., and so forth, for fans of The King and I. I've often wondered if one of these wealthy, powerful individuals woke up in an inner-city apartment with $20 and no link to their life of wealth and privilege, how well they would fare. Those of us in committed relationships are also not independent. We give and receive support, care, and assistance from our significant others in ways impossible to quantify and impossible to overvalue. Although we retain our individual identities, in large part, the relationship injects large portions of we and us into thoughts, attitudes, choices, and decisions. Somehow this state of usness results in the aggregate in married persons having a life expectancy approximately 2 years greater than single persons. I didn't even know that. That is about all I had prepared for this morning. I promised some thoughts on independence, and I have set some out before you. I expect you each to have thoughts of your own on the subject. There will be time for discussion after the end of the service. Please rise in body or spirit and join me in singing "We Celebrate the Web of Life," hymn number 175. As our service draws to a close, we extinguish the flame of our chalice as we say these words together. We extinguish this flame for our community, for our commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Let's wave to our friends on Zoom and Zoomies. Wave to us in the room. Our closing words this morning are written by Heather Christensen. Each night as we gather, we light a common chalice. We sing and celebrate. We pray and pray. Then we each gather strength from the flame and go out from here, taking the light with us.